Hey, it's Patrick from JMP, and we are in the belly of the Vance and Hines beast here and testing. Brian, you're gonna kind of walk us through some of the finer points of the FP3, because at JMP, the one thing I get asked all the time is, do I need to map that? Do I need to flash it? And there's a lot of like general speak about tuning a motorcycle. You know what I mean? So the dealers offer flashes, and there's a million claims out there on the market. But I really think the FP3 kind of condenses those down and gets us into things and makes it digestible. So let's start off. What are you going to need to put this on a bike? You plug it in the data port, right?
Right. So you'll plug it in the data port. You'll need the app. So either from the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, which means you'll need a smartphone. If you have an old flip phone, that's not going to cut it. If you have a standard, just plain old iPad, even that would work.
If you have a flip phone, you probably have a carbureted bike.
Maybe.
So so you are going to need a smartphone, and you're pretty much covered all the major bases as far as apps and developers, right? So what most people don't understand is like they want to, do I need a map? Do I need a flash? What they don't understand is really what that map is you guys in a dyno room for hours and hours with the entire throttle position and fuel percentage graph, and that's what the map is. You guys are adding value, right?
Yeah, so the map is us either adding or removing values from a chart that's basically based off of throttle position and your engine RPM. So if you think about like the old carburetor where you used to like tune individual carburetor circuits, so the idle and then the needles and the main, we basically do that for every throttle position and RPM combination throughout the entire range.
Yeah, so for instance, you would hold the bike, let's say at 10% throttle, which you can see electronically, and then as the RPM rises in each one of those slots, you're putting a fuel value.
Correct.
So what is your general target for an air-fuel ratio?
So general target, ideally, depending on what you're doing, it can change. So we actually set our target AFR table within the cruising range to a hair richer than stoichiometric. So stoichiometric's 14.7, we usually set it to like 14.4, 14.6. Whereas if you're going for wide open throttle, we'll set that to anywhere from 13.1 to say like 12.8. So you want it richer when you're running it really hard so you can keep it cooler and get more power out of it. But at the same time, you don't want to just dump fuel through the system and waste all that money going down the road if you're just cruising.
Where most people are is under about 35% of the throttle most of the time. You don't want to run real fat there all the time, so you're projecting for fuel mileage almost there.
Yes.
Okay, so you guys have done all that work. You made those maps. Now I have my brand new Road Glide here with a set of slip-ons and a Vance and Hines, air cleaner. What do I do to get the map into the bike? Okay,
so from the main menu, you would basically hit the search for a map button. It already knows what kind of bike you have. It knows the displacement, depending on what you have, all based on the VIN. And so at that point, you're just gonna select, Vance and Hines. You would go ahead and select the headers and the mufflers that you happen to have, and then it'll bill you out a map. And then depending on which baffle you happen to have, you'd select the baffle, and then it would give you a completed search entry. You'd press that, it would pop up the full diagram. So if it were on this bike, say, power tools, high output mufflers, standard baffle, 107, you'd say yes, hit continue, and then it would flash it into the bike. Now, when it flashes it into the bike the very first time, it's also going to take an exact carbon copy of your stock OEM map and save that as a backup.
So that's great. So we get that as a lot. You're not going to lose your stock map. Okay, so you could always revert back to your stock settings.
Yes. So that'll save your map. It also does another thing. It saves it locally on the FP3 device itself, but it also saves us on our cloud-based server. And so what that server allows us to do is if you were to call up any of our customer service techs, we can actually see your map on the server. Once you give us your VIN number, we can make changes, modifications, then we can send the file back to you. So if you do, a big bore kit, cams, if I've happened to have dynoed something here locally with the Fuelpak Pro and I can just pick up that map and send it to you, I can absolutely have that capability.
Yeah, that's incredible service, actually. I mean, you're not going to get that anywhere else. I mean, pick up the phone and make tweaks to a map, so to speak. So that's the major thing that people think about is the mapping of the bike. But the FP3 has a ton more functionality. Kind of walk us through at like a high-level option level of like, what else can FP3 do for me? I want to get deeper into it.
Okay, so the FP3 is capable of using your phone's GPS satellite position to recalibrate your speedometer. So if you feel like your speedo's a little bit off, your buddy's getting better mileage, and you can't quite figure out why, the federal government basically dictates that you can be within 5% of actual correct, so long as you're not going the wrong way. So it'll probably mean that the bike is going quicker than you think it is, and you're burning through more miles than you think you are.
Yeah, motorcycle speedo error is pretty common. It's not an uncommon thing. No. This is kind of a cool feature.
Yeah, so you go into the View Edit Maps menu, you go to the General tab, go to Speedometer Calibration, and then you just allow the FP3 app to have access to your GPS satellite signal. And then once you took it out over 60 miles an hour, it would then do the calculation for you. Once it figured out the math through our algorithm, you just pull over, flash the new values into the bike, and then just like that, your speedometer is recalibrated for what actual GPS satellite signal is.
Horsepower and torque. This can give us a horsepower and torque reading?
Yeah, so under our live data screen, you can actually look at calculated horsepower and torque numbers, and we've basically cross-referenced it against our dynos here in-house, and they're pretty accurate within about 2 to 5%.
Seat of the pants is the seat of the pants. It's going to feel the same, but at least you'll have a number to tack onto it.
Yep. We also have the ability to raise the RPM limit. On this particular model on the Milwaukee 8s, we can actually disable the speed limiter from the factory. So for most bikes, M8s, they are limited to 109 miles an hour. We had a lot of feedback from dyno tuners and from off-road competition racers, one of which we actually do a little bit of sponsoring with for some like ARMA Battle of the Twins, road racing. Yep. And they asked for us to remove the speed limiter. And so now this bike, once in the dyno, is capable of going up to about 158 miles an hour. As opposed to the original factory 109. So for racers, for guys who are taking their bike to like run Witcherbrung drag nights, it's a pretty cool tool to have.
Going to a Friday night drag strip, you're going to want your bike to go more than 109. Yep.
And the nice thing is once you're done with the race, you just put it back to normal and just ride it like everyday use.
And then you said you can raise the RPM limit as well?
Yes, so we can raise that up depending on what kind of bike you have. We usually set them in the FP3 to about 6,200 RPM. Typical red line is 55, so we've already bumped that up for you within most FP3 maps. If you happen to have a street rod though, we do set that to say like 9,500 RPM. So we bump that another 500 RPM as well.
Yeah, and 6,200 RPM is a fair amount for a big air-cooled V-twin to be spinning. You guys out there, don't try to get these things to $9,000.
Yep. Wouldn't go above the 6,200.
Right. 6,200 is good.
So the other thing we do is we can control pretty much any aspect of the motorcycle. Idle speed is another big one that I see.
Yeah.
So idle speed on the Milwaukee 8s originally was 850 when they first came out, and then through a service boltzmann, they basically asked everybody like, oh, okay, 850 was too low. We're having some crankcase pressure issues, bump it up to say 950. So instead of having to take your bike back to the dealer, you could just make the changes on the tables yourself and do that.
Nice.
We also do have quite a few people in Japan where it's a big deal to drop your idle RPM limit.
Yep.
They just love that
Those
sound.
Those guys love the
So it gives them the freedom
it does sound cool.
So it gives them the freedom to make those changes if they want. Camshafts, we have a full list of camshafts available for all Sportsters, twin cams, and Milwaukee 8s. So we just recently changed it where we broke it down by VIN. And so now the VIN designator that we use to find the map for your bike will only show you Sportster cams if you are a Sportster bike. If it's twin cam,
so you don't have to go rifling through a bunch of models.
You don't have to go through a big list of all of our camshafts. It's now specific to your bike.
If you just put a set of slip-ons on your bike, you may be able to get away with it. Mm-hmm. We highly recommend with full systems and air cleaners, you do map your bike. With a cam, you really don't have a choice.
You absolutely have to.
Yeah. One, you were not going to be getting the potential out of the camshaft setup, and two, you are going to run super lean and probably damage your bike.
Yeah.
So that's something you guys out there, you want hot rod stuff, especially with Milwaukee 8s, man. Milwaukee 8s work so well with drop-in cams that the FP3 is a perfect solution to get the thing dialed in. You don't have to go to a dyno. You don't have to spend the money. You don't have to take the time. Good dyno guys, there's normally a line. Yeah. And they're not cheap.
So they can be up there. But just like that, I mean, if you did something bigger than just a cam. So if you did the Stage 4, Stage 5 tire treader kit, if you did, I've had a couple 124s and 128s in here already. So we do offer something for the dealers and for tuners called the Fuelpak Pro. So even if you have an FP3, you can still get it fully dyno tuned for whatever combination you can throw at it.
So you have the consumer version, Fuelpak, and then walk us through what Fuelpak Pro is.
So the Fuelpak Pro is essentially an add-on. Think of it as an in-between from the FP3 and the bike. It comes with two Bosch 4.9 wideband sensors that go into the header ports. It's new hardware with new circuit boards, new firmware, about 2 years development time here in the testing department. And that will basically allow you to fully map your bike utilizing the wideband sensors. So normal narrowband sensors can only really read, dead on, too lean, too rich, and it doesn't really tell you to what degree. And so one of the things we've done with the wideband sensors is we can now see how far off we are from the target and hone in on it much more quickly. The data collection's a lot faster. We can target all the way down to 13.0 AFR as opposed to a little bit richer than Stoich. So we can get a better performing map much more quickly and for any combination of parts. Like I said, I've had a couple 124s, 128s, even a 143 16 dyna the other day, just here in the shop for R&D.
So you touched on something there that I think people a lot of times say, well, I have O2 sensors in my bike. Mm-hmm. Well, those O2 sensors are narrowband O2 sensors, so they're fairly limited. So that's another reason to get an FP3 and get a map, the best tool is only as good as its sensors. And if that stock unit is relying on those sensors to make changes, it's not going to be able to do it. That's where the FP3 comes in. And guys like Brian have already made those changes in the form of a map that put the bike where it needs to be.
Right, and if you happen to have a map and maybe it's something that we haven't mapped yet, or if you have a certain combination of parts that we haven't mapped, we do have an Autotune feature built into the FP3. And so with that, you can actually flatten out your AFR table. You can then pull voltage readings from the front and rear O2 sensors, and it will build you a new volumetric efficiency table just for your bike and your parts, wherever you happen to live.
That's awesome.
And so even if we don't happen to have the exact parts, you can start with something pretty close and then get it dialed in with maybe 2 to 3 20 to 30 minute riding sessions with the Autotune mode.
That's huge.
Yeah.
So we touched on all the high level stuff with Fuelpak here, and it's really kind of a never ending story. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a series of videos that we go deeper into each one of those subjects, kind of explain them better to the end user. And as we update those, I'll update the cards in the video and we'll add links to the description below. That way, if you guys have questions, you can check out the videos, or you can always drop us a comment and go work on those motorcycles.